Same reaction. Cathy Engelbert should resign as the commissioner of the WNBA. And the reason I said that, fellas, is because when a player, and Nafisha Colley is a star in the WNBA. This is not some role player. This is her, okay? Who also happens to be a vice president. You understand? You know.
That's not hyperbole. That's Stephen A. Smith calling for the commissioner of the WNBA to resign over what just happened. And if you've been following this league closely, you know Stephen A. doesn't throw around words like that casually. What could possibly force the most powerful voice in sports media to demand Cathy Engelbert step down? The answer is simpler and more devastating than anyone wants to admit. Caitlin Clark just executed the quietest power play in professional sports history, and in doing so, she exposed a truth the WNBA has been desperately trying to hide. The league doesn't just need her, they're completely dependent on her, and they just realized it at the worst possible moment. Here's what actually happened. While everyone was celebrating sold-out arenas and record-breaking TV ratings, the WNBA Players Association made a catastrophic miscalculation. They opted out of their collective bargaining agreement 2 years early, convinced they were holding an unbeatable hand. The logic seemed sound: attendance up, viewership exploding, corporate sponsors circling. If there was ever a moment to demand more money, better benefits, and a bigger slice of the revenue pie, this was it. They walked into those negotiations with all the confidence of someone who thinks they're driving a tank. What they forgot is that Caitlin Clark is the engine, and engines don't negotiate. They just stop running. If you believe the story behind the story matters more than the headlines, smash that like button right now. It tells us you're paying attention to what's actually happening, not just what they want you to see. The timeline here is crucial because it reveals just how fast this entire situation unraveled. Just weeks ago, the narrative seemed bulletproof. Women's basketball was finally having its moment. Charter flights were becoming reality. Television deals were being signed. Everyone was patting themselves on the back, convinced the mission was accomplished. The league felt like it had crossed some invisible finish line where nothing could possibly go wrong anymore. Growth was inevitable. Success was guaranteed. The vibe was immaculate. Then the union, watching all this momentum build, decided it was the perfect time to light a match inside a fireworks factory. They didn't wait for the current contract to expire. They didn't test the waters cautiously. They opted out 2 years early, threw the collective bargaining agreement in the trash like an expired coupon, and marched straight into negotiations thinking they held all the leverage. From their perspective, it made complete sense. The money was flowing. The attention was there. The timing felt perfect. But here's what they didn't account for. This newfound prosperity wasn't diversified. It wasn't spread evenly across a roster of equally marketable stars. It had a name. It had a face. It had a specific logo three-point shot that sent arenas into absolute chaos. Stephen A. essentially reminded everyone of what the numbers have been screaming for months. When Caitlin Clark was in the league, viewership exploded. When she wasn't playing, the numbers crashed back to pre-Clark levels almost immediately. The watch parties, the sold-out arenas, the mainstream media coverage, all of it followed one player, not the uniform, not the league. Her. So while the union was busy making demands and talking about equity and collective bargaining power, Caitlin Clark did something far more impactful. She went silent. No press tour, no dramatic statement, no cryptic social media posts. She simply said no to the next big thing everyone assumed she would automatically join. When Unrivaled came calling with money, equity, and a red carpet rolled out by veteran players who were supposed to be her allies, she declined, chose to play golf instead. That one decision spoke louder than any press conference ever could. Stephen A. didn't call it a retirement. He didn't frame it as rebellion. He called it something far more concerning, a quiet resignation, a strategic retreat designed to send a message without ever raising her voice. Caitlin Clark didn't storm out. She calmly walked toward the exit, left the door open just enough to make everyone panic about whether she might actually leave for good, and then went to enjoy her off-season in complete peace. Meanwhile, the league that just opted out of its financial security blanket is now staring at the very real possibility that their entire revenue model could vanish if she decides she's happier doing literally anything else.
The commissioner, and I say that not in any kind of derogatory way, she was talking about Cathy Engelbert directly. She revealed private conversations, you understand, with quotes from this lady, the commissioner, about what she said that came across as dismissive, as derogatory, and unappreciative of the.
Those weren't just casual complaints. Those were direct accusations against the commissioner of the WNBA, revealed through private conversations that painted Cathy Engelbert as dismissive, derogatory, and fundamentally unappreciative of the very athletes driving the league's success. When a vice president of the Players Association is publicly exposing the commissioner's private comments, that's not just drama. That's a structural collapse happening in real time. And here's where it gets even more complicated. The player who made those accusations, she's not some fringe voice. She's a star with real influence. Someone with institutional power inside the Players Association. When she went public with those conversations, she wasn't just venting frustration. She was signaling that the relationship between leadership and the players has completely broken down. And Caitlin Clark, watching all of this unfold, made a calculated decision. She chose not to participate. Think about what that means. The union opts out of the CBA earlies, expecting solidarity and leverage. The commissioner is publicly accused of being dismissive toward players. The league's biggest star, the one person everyone assumed would be the face of whatever comes next, quietly declines to engage with the next big venture and goes radio silent. That's not a coincidence. That's a chess move. And it's working exactly as intended, because now everyone from Stephen A. Smith to league executives is suddenly realizing they have no backup plan. The WNBA spent years telling everyone that the league was bigger than any one player, that it didn't need a singular face, that the collective strength of women's basketball would carry it forward. Then someone came along that everyone actually wanted to watch, and that entire comfortable narrative shattered the moment she implied she might be just fine walking away. Many of you have been saying this for weeks in the comments. You saw this power dynamic shift happening long before the mainstream media caught on. Drop a comment right now with your take. Do you think Caitlin is making the right move by staying silent? Or should she be more vocal about what's happening? Because this conversation is just getting started, and your perspective matters. Let's connect the dots here, because what's happening goes way deeper than one player declining one league invitation. The WNBA Players Association thought they were leveraging peak momentum, record attendance, historic TV ratings, new sponsorship deals flooding in. They looked at all those metrics and concluded this was their moment to strike. Opt out early, demand more, secure the bag while the getting was good. The strategy would have been brilliant if they'd remembered one critical detail. All of that momentum has a single source. Stephen A. didn't mince words about this. He pointed out that when Caitlin Clark wasn't playing, viewership immediately crashed back to pre-2024 levels. Not slowly, not gradually, instantly. The arenas that were packed when she played went back to sparse crowds when she wasn't on the court. The mainstream coverage that suddenly made women's basketball a daily topic evaporated the moment she was out of the picture. The data is ruthless and undeniable. Fans weren't tuning in for the WNBA. They were tuning in for her. And here's where the union's miscalculation becomes almost tragic. They assumed this newfound wealth was permanent, diversified, and completely immune to disruption. They operated under the belief that corporate sponsors had fallen in love with women's basketball as a concept, not with one specific player who happened to make it culturally relevant. So when they opted out of the CBA and started making demands, they genuinely believed the league had no choice but to meet them. After all, you can't have a season without players, right? What they didn't anticipate was that Caitlin Clark would respond by demonstrating something far more powerful. You also can't have a financially viable season without the one player driving 90% of the revenue. When she declined unrivaled, she wasn't just saying no to one opportunity. She was sending a clear message to every negotiating room in the WNBA ecosystem. I don't need any of this. But all of you desperately need me. And I'm perfectly comfortable proving that point by doing absolutely nothing. That's not arrogance. That's market reality, backed by cold, hard data. Television networks signed massive deals based on projections of Caitlin Clark's trajectory and continued participation. If she steps away, or if games get canceled due to labor disputes, those networks aren't going to just absorb the loss. Contracts have clauses. Payments get withheld. Suddenly, that revenue everyone was fighting over shrinks to nothing. And a 50% share of zero is still zero. Stephen A. called this economic suicide, and it's hard to argue with that assessment. The union created instability at the exact moment when stability was the most valuable asset they had. They assumed they were driving a tank into negotiations. What they actually did was remove the engine from a vehicle and then act surprised when it stopped moving. And let's talk about what's happening behind the scenes, because sources are whispering about growing frustration among player agents. Agents understand that a rising tide lifts all boats. Caitlin Clark's presence brought endorsement opportunities to players who'd never had them before. In one season, her impact forced the league to implement charter flights, a demand that decades of negotiations had failed to achieve. Yet the response from certain factions wasn't gratitude. It was resentment. This feels less about Caitlin Clark personally and more about historical grievances. It's true that veteran players endured hardships so the next generation could flourish. That's how progress works. But being angry at a 22-year-old because she didn't have to suffer the exact same struggles is emotionally understandable but strategically disastrous. Fans are invested in Caitlin Clark, not in collective bargaining drama. Ratings, jersey sales, and engagement all prove that point. There is also a global dimension almost no one is discussing. Caitlin Clark isn't just an American celebrity anymore. She's a global brand. European basketball clubs would pay her astronomical amounts for short exhibition tours. A worldwide tour featuring her would sell out arenas in London, Paris, Tokyo. She could make more in 1 month than the WNBA's entire player payroll. The WNBA is the most convenient option for her. Not her only one. Stephen A. implied this gives her an escape route the league cannot control. If the environment becomes too toxic, she has a passport and a massive global fan base that would follow her anywhere. That possibility should terrify anyone who cares about the league's long-term survival. Because once fans realize this alternative exists, the WNBA's negotiating position collapses entirely. At the core of all this chaos is one brutal, simple realization. Caitlin Clark doesn't need the WNBA. The WNBA desperately needs Caitlin Clark. Stephen A. didn't confirm a formal resignation, but he confirmed something far more unsettling. The league is one bad decision away from watching its biggest star decide she's happier, richer, and more influential outside the system than inside it. When the union opted out of that agreement, they thought they were making a power move. What they actually did was hand Caitlin Clark a loaded weapon and dare her to use it. Her response wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was calculated and devastating. She simply demonstrated that she can walk away without hesitation, and that fact alone should terrify every boardroom involved. If you want to stay ahead of this story as it develops, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this situation is far from over. And what happens next could fundamentally reshape professional women's basketball. We'll be tracking every move, every statement, and every power play as it unfolds. The league's initial crash out was loud, emotional, and impulsive. Her response was quiet, calculated, and utterly destructive. History tends to remember the quiet moves that change everything, not the loud ones that lead to collapse. And right now, Caitlin Clark is writing that history, one strategic silence at a time.